Hey guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance. Imagine getting fired via text message at your own wedding by a boss who hit on you and you rejected. She then ordered you to vacate all company property, except plot twist, you literally own the building of the company. Let's dive right into the story. And the title story starts like this. So for context, this happened in Eastern Europe. I'm head of strategy at a tech firm that grew out of the scrappy phase a while ago. I was hired by the founder when it was still 5 engineers, 2 folding tables. I built out the metrics and systems that kept us from setting ourselves on fire as we scaled. Our unit economics shifted because of a handful of models and playbooks I put together with an ops director who was maybe the only other person who loved process as much as I did. The "we are making money like real money" moment came after we started following those playbooks. I'm not saying I single-handedly saved the company or anything, but I could show you a graph with a very rude slope if I was in the mood. I'm paid well though, people hear my comp number and assume I must be either magic or political, but it's neither, it's just cheaper for them to keep paying me than to rebuild what I've built if I would walk away. The board knows that and the founder knows that. Most people don't think about it because it's boring, and boring does not trend on Slack. Here's one detail though I never make a big deal about. My family's investment group bought the office building we are in. It was a timing thing, the building was going cheap, the math made sense, we had the cash, so our LLC snagged it and locked in a lease with the company. The founder was relieved of course because it took one spinning plate off his list, the board saw the terms signed and then moved on. I disclosed my role to the relevant people from day one and recused myself from anything that touched the lease. We set up all the correct conflict of interest paperwork, it is all above board. I'm the managing partner on the landlord side, which basically means I get emails about HVAC filters and fire inspections at weird hours. Nobody besides the founder, the CFO and the board really knows or cares. New hires certainly don't. Why would they? It's a line on a chart of accounts, not a mural in the lobby. Now enter the new COO though. I will call her Karen because there's a point where the name becomes a job description. She was brought in by a board member who loves buzzwords that look good in deck form. Operational excellence, scale with discipline, efficiency. You know the type. No shade on the role by the way. A good COO is worth their weight in gold and then some. But it's one of those jobs where being loud and confident can trick people into thinking that you are competent, at least for a little while. The first impression, a full court press of performative authority. She showed up to her first all hands with a blazer you could cut glass on and dropped lines like, "I don't do excuses, I do results," and "if you're uncomfortable, that's growth knocking on your door." If you've been in corporate long enough, you start collecting those phrases like souvenir spoons. It was not really the tone that bugged me, it was the empty galleries. Her questions were the kind you ask when you need to look like you're questioning something, but you don't actually understand it yet. Why do we have 3 tiers of pricing when 2 is clearer? Because our enterprise tier subsidizes our mid-market churn. Why are we not shifting ad spend to social? Well, because we already did and it gave us worse CAC than retargeting A and B, which I explained in a deck that she hadn't read yet. And yeah, I try to be helpful. I schedule time, I send short, digestible briefs. I offered to walk her through the structure of our operations, our metrics, where we've got slack and where we don't. She took the briefings and then announced in a leadership meeting that a lot of this seems like legacy thinking before she had time to know what this even was. It's fine though, new executives have to peacock a little bit. The danger is when they start believing the feathers. Then we get to the part that actually matters. So around a month in, there was a company happy for. Nothing fancy, a rented patio behind a restaurant, everyone pretending the cheese board is exciting. I don't usually linger at those, I'm polite but then I bounce. My wife and I were close to our wedding at that point, so I was trying to stay clean, keep nights open and not get pulled into last-minute work drama. But since the new COO was still ramping, I figured I should be visible and supportive. I'm nursing a soda, talking to an engineering manager about a weird spike in error reports that turned out to be someone reusing an API key in an internal script. But as I'm wrapping up, Karen corners me, physically corners me, braced arm against a wall, all friendly grin, and perfume that screamed duty-free. She gets close enough that I instinctively take half a step back. "You know," she says, "you and I could be a power couple here, real synergy. We should continue this conversation somewhere quieter." I replied something like, "That is inappropriate, I'm not interested." And by the way, I was not rude, I was not performative, I just made it clear she had crossed the line. I also mentioned that I was engaged and we were getting married soon, which should have been obvious because there's a running joke in my team about the countdown that had been plastered all over our internal Slack. So I stepped away and I went home early. I told my wife what happened because our default mode is telling each other stuff like that. Her response was basically, gross, document it. So I jotted down a contemporaneous note, time, place, what was said, who was nearby and so on, and then I went back to obsessing about hotel blocks and whether my uncle would bring his guitar to the rehearsal dinner. Well, from there, I went from the guy whose decks solve problems to the guy who is mysteriously not good enough. She, aka Karen, started CCing me on all kinds of nitpicks. She would reply to my reports with, "This seems high level," like that's a meaningful critique. In meetings, she dropped references to fat and overlaps and roles that can be consolidated while looking at me the way you look at a leftover in the office fridge that you think might be bad, but you cannot quite tell. If you've worked under someone who decided not to like you, you know the feeling, death by 1,000 vague comments. I flagged it to HR though. They did what HR usually does when the person you are flagging is new and has a shiny title. "We appreciate you coming forward. We take all allegations seriously. Let's monitor and circle back." It felt like being told by a waiter that the kitchen is aware you're hungry. I tried to stay focused on my wedding, and my wife and I had planned a small beach ceremony on Koh Samui, Thailand. Not huge, but meaningful. By the way, that's an amazing island. If you guys ever want to go to Thailand, I would highly recommend going to Koh Samui. Anyway, we wanted sand under our feet and cheap plastic chairs and the kind of music you can dance to without knowing how. My phone was supposed to be off for the day. I handed the phone to my best man with the instructions, "Got this. If the building catches fire, put it out without calling me." He slipped into his jacket and went to go do the thing we spent months planning. The ceremony happens, there's a breeze, the officiant does the standard "you may now kiss" line, and we kiss. My brain is basically a Polaroid that hasn't developed yet. I'm not a romantic poet or anything, I'm just telling you that for a few minutes everything felt like it was in the right place. I was not thinking about anything except the person in front of me and how I got lucky. Well, somewhere during the first slice of cake, my best man comes over with the face that you wear when you're about to tell your friend his tire is flat. He pulls my phone from his pocket and shows me the lock screen. It is lit up with a stack of messages because I forgot to disable preview, all from one number. Karen's. And by the way, guys, if you can imagine what Karen texted OP on her wedding, let me know right now in the comments. And by the way, while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video, because it would help me tremendously if we could reach 1,000 likes. Thank you so much, it is very much appreciated. Anyway, I'm not gonna paste every single word she sent, that would make this post twice as long, but the gist was, she was terminating my employment effective immediately, she described me as useless, overvalued, too old and not aligned with the new direction, my access was being revoked, and security would pack my belongings. I was to sever all ties and vacate all company property without even attempting to enter the building anymore. There was no call, no email that I could see. Later there was a boilerplate PDF that read like someone found a template on the internet, but just texts, multiple, escalating, sent while my best man tried to decide if he should stop my wedding to tell me that my job exploded. I felt that weird cold feeling that starts in your bones and moves out. My wife saw my face and asked what is wrong. We stepped aside, I showed her the messages and she made a noise I've only ever heard twice, that one and the time a delivery driver dumped an entire chocolate cake upside down on our porch. It is equal parts rage and then disbelief. Here's the thing though, I was on official PTO, everyone knew where I was, and the time off had been approved months in advance. The founder had congratulated me in the leadership channel, but that didn't stop the messages. She sent them with the speed of someone who's pressing send before their better judgment can wake up and stop them. I'm not saying I'm a Zen master, my first impulse was to throw my phone into the ocean and go dance, but then I read the last line again. You are to immediately sever all ties and vacate all company property. Do not attempt to enter the building. I started laughing. My wife stared at me like I'd been body snatched. What are you smiling about? She asked. I showed her the line again and said, she just told me to vacate all company property. My wife's eyes went from angry to confused to that smirk that she gets when she solves a wordle in two. Oh. We stepped away from the music. I called my lawyer back home because there's nothing like a time zone to make your crisis someone else's morning coffee. He's on retainer for the building, not for my employment, so he's the guy who emails me about sprinklers and all that kind of stuff. He picked up on the second ring with the tone of a person who knows that if I'm calling on my wedding day, it's either something big or I've lost my passport. I gave him the 2-sentence summary. And well, he started laughing in a way that made the line crackle. Then he asked me to read him exactly what she wrote. I read the last text out loud and he went quiet for a beat. He reminded me of a clause in the master lease that I'd forgotten because it's usually nothing more than a paragraph that we just check off and never touch. It is not exotic, it's designed to protect us as landlords from getting dragged into a tenant's internal disasters. It basically says if the tenant, through its designated agents, engages in bad faith actions or gross misconduct that jeopardizes the building's operations or the landlord's interest, the landlord can issue a notice of breach and, if the tenant fails to cure, terminate within a very short window. There's also a general clause that you see pretty often that lets us restrict access quickly if there's a security or legal risk. This is a combination of standard "don't burn down the building" language and "we won't get stuck holding the bag if you hire a hurricane and put them in charge." We're not fans of pulling nuclear options really. I mean, evicting a company is messy and expensive and usually loses money for everyone involved. But my lawyer pointed out a specific piece, her instruction for me to vacate all company property, the revocation of my access, and the fact that she had terminated a key executive via text on approved PTO while using language that would make an HR rep spontaneously combust. There was an argument to be made, stronger than I expected, that she has put us in breach territory, not because she fired me. Technically, companies can restructure. It was because the manner and timing and the explicit instruction created immediate conflicts with my role as a landlord. There were security implications too. There were conflict of interest disclosures on file that she hadn't accounted for, which meant she just stepped on a legal landmine face first. I asked him a question I've always wanted to ask during a soap opera, but never thought I would get to. Well, what happens if I take her order literally? He laughed harder and then got serious. If you want to proceed, we can issue a notice of breach and specific cure period or vacate instruction citing the particular actions that triggered it. We can restrict access to the building as the property owner, provided we are maintaining safety and not interfering with life safety systems. We cannot let them move equipment that's landlord-owned without proper sign-off. We can require them to vacate at the end of the notice if they don't cure, which in this case means rescinding the action and providing assurance that their agents won't engage in this again. I asked him to draft it, and I also asked him to send it to the board and the founder, because while I was not married to the idea of making this my wedding reception entertainment, I was not gonna sit there and swallow being called useless and told to get out of my own building like a misbehaving intern. I texted Karen back a single sentence, "Understood, I will comply with your directive immediately." We went back to the party. I kept my phone in my pocket and tried to keep the laughter under control because I didn't want to explain our combined landlord/employment revenge plan to my aunt during the slow dance. My lawyer hit send on the notice. It had the language Karen wrote, quoted and preserved, and it was CC'd to the founder and the board. It was polite and incredibly sharp around the edges. Morning comes over there, the office opens, and Karen shows up in one of those suits that makes you wonder if the shoulder pads are bulletproof. She swipes her badge. It works because my directive was not to lock anyone out at 8 AM. My lawyer and I decided to just keep it clean. We were not gonna be petty by flipping every badge. We were going to be precise. We had a plan for the time window the lease required from notice to consequence. So when Karen walked into the lobby, she saw 2 security guards who were not the company's usual contract guys. They were our building crew, big dudes who look like they move safes for fun. They were standing next to my lawyer and a member of the board who has a face that can do the "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed" meme without moving a muscle. I was not there. I was on a beach eating fruit for breakfast and trying to decide if the hotel coffee was stronger than my will to care. But I got a second-hand rundown. The board member opened with, "What did you do?" Which, if you've heard it from a parent, lands the same at any age. Karen did the thing where you act confused and hopes the confusion will win the day. My lawyer introduced himself and explained the notice briefly. He pointed at the printed copy with her text quoted in it. He pointed at the lease clauses and he explained that the building's owner has issued a cure or vacate instruction, and she asked who the landlord was. He pointed at a framed photograph hanging on the wall between the bathrooms of the ground floor lobby. It was from when the company did an Employee of the Decade thing to boost morale, and well, it was my face, looking earnest in a way I now regret. She said something that I'm told was most likely something like, You've gotta be kidding me. Well, right about then my phone rang. The board member who I actually like was on the line, sounding like a man trying to defuse a bomb with a paperclip. He apologized first, which I appreciated, and he said this caught him off guard. He said the notice dropped into his inbox like a grenade. He asked what we could do to fix it, and I told him I was not gonna talk about my employment during my wedding trip, not because I'm dramatic, but because I actually wasn't. I was trying to salvage the day and not let work colonize it. But I said I would be willing to discuss the property situation, since that was in my role as managing partner of the Landlord LLC. I kept it dry. The way you talk when you are reading a recipe out loud, and he asked what would it take to retract the termination notice and the building notice. He was clearly trying to hold two things in his head, getting the company out of a mess and not committing to something he could not deliver on behalf of the rest of the board. I have been in their shoes. That is the price of titles, you get to catch the falling swords. I told him the following: the immediate action that triggered the breach notice needed to be rescinded and acknowledged as improper. This was not about my feelings, it was about creating a record that we are not gonna tolerate that kind of thing happening in the building we own. The agent who did it needed to be removed from their role, not moved sideways, removed. The phrase "for cause" was important to me, not because I wanted to punish for sport, but because anything else would be treated like a coin flip at a performance review. Also, the lease would be renegotiated at a higher rate. We were under market because we had done the company a favor back when we signed, and the market had moved. I didn't need to price gouge them, but I'm not running a charity here. And since there was now a vacancy in the COO role, we should talk about whether someone who understands the systems that make the company money should be in that seat. I said I would be open to taking on operational leadership if there was support from the board and the founder, with the caveat that I would step away from any landlord decisions to avoid conflicts, and we would appoint another partner as the managing lead for the building. I did not want to be a cartoon villain or anything. I really wanted to stabilize the thing I had helped build. I didn't present it as a ransom, I presented it as, here's a realistic plan to get you through today and prevent this from happening again. The board member said he needed to talk to council and the other members. I said fine, you have until the notice window ends. I went swimming, it moved fast, it always does when money is about to be set on fire, and within hours the founder emailed me from an account that still had access. He was furious, but not at me. He had been in the loop on my conflict of interest paperwork since day one, and he knew the building belonged to my family. He was mortified and he said, "This is a disaster and I'm sorry this landed on your wedding." He asked if we could jump on a call later. And well, I told him the board had it. I added that I'd be reachable for a few minutes at the end of the day. Meanwhile at the office, Karen went into damage control mode. She tried to spin it like, we are restructuring and this is resistance. She walked around doing the kind of pep talk that makes normal people pretend to tie their shoes so they can avoid eye contact. She told someone in finance that landlords don't get to dictate terms, which is a funny sentence when you say it in a building that you don't own. The building security guys simply did what the notice told them to do. They were ready to escort people out if necessary after the window passed. They let everyone continue working while the board pulled emergency sessions and the founder did the exact thing you have to do in that moment, which is triage. By late afternoon, my lawyer had two things in his inbox. One was a very formal letter from the board rescinding the termination as improper and acknowledging that the process violated policy and good judgment. They did not admit to illegal actions in those exact words because lawyers, but the phrasing had weight. The other was a termination letter for the COO with language that made it clear she was done. It was effective immediately, it cited cause, it cited policy violations, including misuse of communication channels for personal actions and actions that jeopardized company operations. It was signed by the board chair and the founder, no severance. No, let's put you on a performance plan, just a security escort out the building and a cardboard box. The moment the recession and the firing hit, the cure requirement on the lease was met. The company actually did something to address the failure. We withdrew the termination of the lease notice because frankly, we were not trying to shut down a building, we were trying to make a point sharp enough that they could cut decisions with it. And when we got home, there were meetings, there were apologies, which I accepted because I'm not in the business of collecting them like baseball cards. There was also the part where I had to draw a clear line. If I was going to take on operational leadership, I needed autonomy within clear guardrails. I did not want to be the revenge COO, I wanted to fix the damage and move forward. We restructured, we adjusted roles, and I returned as COO, stepping away from direct landlord duties to avoid conflicts. Another partner in our family group took point on all building matters now. We also set up stricter policies for the building access points that had gotten sloppy under the previous regime. We worked with HR to reinforce processes for terminations and performance management that involve, things like a meeting and documentation and not just texting someone 15 minutes before they cut a cake at their wedding. We also renegotiated the lease. We did not hike it to the moon, we took it to fair market rate with a modest bump for the privilege of stability. The board agreed without theatrics, they were in full let's not light ourselves on fire again mode. As for Karen, she disappeared in that way executives do when their LinkedIn goes open to opportunities. I did not go looking, but someone told me she popped up briefly at a consultancy that specializes in transformation and then went quiet. I'm not gonna build a shrine to Schadenfreude. I got what I needed, a boundary reset and a company that recommitted to not letting this place turn into a frat house. And the next one is another fantastic malicious compliance story, and by the way, let me know in the comments if you enjoy the malicious compliance. So, around 15 years ago, I worked on a sales team and we got a new manager called Kevin. No one warmed to him, and from day one he strutted in like the second coming of the Wolf of Wall Street minus the charisma. He couldn't go 10 minutes without reminding us how incredible he had been at his last company. Apparently, he smashed targets, broke records, and worked his way up the ladder faster than anyone in history. If his mouth had a Fitbit, it would have hit 10K brags before lunch. The man didn't stop talking about himself and made no effort to get to know us, the team. At his first sales meeting, he opened with a monologue about his greatness that could have qualified as a TED Talk titled, "Why I am brilliant and you are not." Then he laid into us about our sales figures. We were over target, but according to him, we were not aiming high enough. We were a pretty nice and upbeat company, by the way, so there were lots of raised eyebrows and WTF shared looks, like how do you bollock a team who are airways over target? And then he, so full of himself, actually said, "I could hit that target on my own, so if you cannot lot smash it as a team, something is seriously wrong here." One of my Boulder colleagues said, "Wow, what a fun and educational idea. Let's make it a competition, you versus the whole team." Everyone clapped and shouted a hell yeah. And then, as if fate itself wanted to join the fun, our director heard the commotion and walked in. My colleague announced, "Kevin's going up against the team this month to keep us motivated and show us how it's done." The director agreed, it was a great idea, and the first week of Kevin versus the entire sales team was like watching a live-action version of David and Goliath if Goliath was a middle manager with anger issues and David was literally everyone else. Kevin strutted in on Monday like he was about to deliver a master class but didn't achieve a single sale, or the next day or the next several after that. Meanwhile, the team was having the time of our lives. Even our new starter, Jonathan, a sweet nervous lad who had never done sales before, was outselling Kevin by week 2. Every time Jonathan made a sale, the office would erupt like he had scored in the World Cup, by the third week Kevin had entered what we would call his tantrum era. Phones were slammed, headsets were thrown, and at one point he even dramatically announced that this system is rigged. Kevin didn't make it until the end of the month. He left because he was pursuing other opportunities, which we all understood to mean fired for being spectacularly bad. My colleague was right though, it was fun and very educational. In our mutual hatred for Kevin, we worked harder than ever and smashed all previous sales records in company history, which felt extra satisfying being as this was Kevin's main brag. I looked him up on LinkedIn recently and his bio reads world-class sales director, open to new opportunities, which I think probably means unemployed for being spectacularly bad and still full of himself, so it seems he didn't learn much at all. And the next one is another malicious compliance story, and it is absolutely brilliant. It is titled, "Okay, my turn now." So, years ago, I worked at a department store that was known for gimmick promotions. So this particular promotion was spend $50 and get this frying pan for $5. It was a quality item worth more, but one per customer, because management stressed that because they did not receive a large quantity. One day, a lady says that I spent $150, can I get 3 of them? Politely, I say no, it's one for a customer. She throws a hissy fit and demands to see the manager. Well, I call him and he arrives, chats with her and then tells us to give her 3 pans. Okay. He leaves another customer that comes up and asks how many can I get? My reply was, how many can you carry? My coworker said we cannot do that, but I did and did that to every customer that was asking. We ran out of these pans very quickly. The manager became more thoughtful about embarrassing employees in front of customers after that. And yeah guys, thank you for watching today. Please don't forget to check out my endless playlist on the left and I will see you again tomorrow.